The coffee tasted like recycled hydraulic fluid, but Jax drank it anyway. In the deep dark, you didn't waste heat, and you didn't waste caffeine. Jax sat suspended in the gel-filled crash couch of the USC Grendel, a ship that looked less like a spacecraft and more like a flying oil refinery that had been beaten with a sledgehammer. She wasn't pretty. She was a heavy-class tectonic excavator. She was 300,000 tons of reinforced tungsten, magnetic grappling claws, and an engine block big enough to power a small moon. Proximity alert, the ship's AI, Betsy, droned. Her voice synth was stuck on a setting that sounded like a smoker with a throat infection. Debris field. Vector 49er. I see it, Bets. Jax grunted, his fingers dancing over a console that was more grease than plastic. He wasn't looking out the window. Windows were structural weaknesses. Jax was looking at the lithosphere array, a sensor suite that didn't bother with radar or lidar. Those were for tourists. The array measured mass. It measured density. It sent out thumping pulses of gravimetric waves that could map the veins of gold inside an asteroid 10,000 kilometers away. Just a cloud of silicate dust, Jax muttered, watching the orange blobs on his screen. Trash. No ore. He scratched his beard, which was currently gray, wire-thick, undusted with carbon residue. He was 45 standard years old, but the radiation and the gravity shifts of the belt made him look 60. He was a rock rat. A ghost. A nobody. Fuel reserves at 12%, Betsy reminded him. If we do not secure a payload within 12 hours, we will be drifting. I know, Jack sighed. Don't nag. He was about to spin the Grendel around and head for Sector 7 when the void lit up. It wasn't a natural light. It was the tearing of space-time. KRAKKOOM. Even inside the heavily insulated cockpit, Jax felt the vibration in his teeth. Cherenkov radiation bloomed blue and white on the external cameras. Energy spike, Betsy croaked. High-yield warp signatures detected. Identification. Royal Navy. Jax leaned forward, his spine popping. The Royals? Out here in the ass end of the belt? One by one, they emerged from the rift. The contrast was laughable. First came the frigates, sleek and silver, shaped like arrowheads. Then the cruisers, bristling with kinetic railguns and polished to a mere sheen. And finally, the Leviathan. The HMS Sovereign. It was a super dreadnought. 5 kilometers of white ceramic armor, gold trim, and pulsating blue ion drives. It was beautiful. It was majestic. It was completely useless for mining, and therefore, Jax hated it. Hail them, Jax said. Let's tell them to watch their drift. I don't want their ion wake frying my sensors. Opening channel, Betsy said. The main screen flickered. The face of a communications officer appeared. He was young, clean-shaven, and looked like he used moisturizer. He saw Jax, sweaty, wearing a stained tank top, sitting in a dark, messy cockpit, and actually wrinkled his nose. Civilian vessel, the officer said, his voice dripping with boredom. You are in the flight path of the Royal Flotilla, escorting Her Highness, Princess Elara. Clear the vector immediately or be fired upon. Jax rolled his eyes. Nice to meet you too, sunshine. I'm towing a heavy rig here. I can't just pirouette out of your way. I need 5 minutes to burn retrograde. You have 2 minutes, scavenger. The officer cut the link. The screen went black. Friendly bunch, Jax muttered. He grabbed the control yokes. All right, Bets. Spin up the main thrusters. Let's get out of their majesty's way before they scratch their paint on us. The Grendel groaned as Jax fired the maneuvering thrusters. The massive industrial ship began a slow, agonizing turn away from the fleet. Jax watched the tactical map. The Royal Fleet was moving in a tight parade formation. It was a show of force, a diplomatic convoy heading to the core worlds, They relied on high-tech stealth shielding and long-range lidar. "Wait," Jack said, frowning. He tapped the glass of his primary monitor. The lithosphere array. "Betsy, run a seismic ping." "Deep spectrum." "Ping initiated." Through the Grendel sent out a pulse of gravity waves. It was designed to find heavy metals inside rock. It worked by detecting mass that didn't match the background vacuum. The ping returned. On the visual feed, standard cameras, space was empty. Just the stars and the royal fleet. But on Jax's seismic screen, 3 massive red blobs appeared. They were huge, heavy, and they were sitting dead silent, right in the middle of the fleet's path. "Bets, diagnostics. Are the sensors glitching?" "Negative. Sensors operating at 98% efficiency. 3 anomalies detected. Mass equivalent to Wraith-class heavy destroyers. Density indicates hyper-compressed carbon armor." Jax's blood ran cold. The royal ships weren't reacting. Their radars were spinning, their thermal scanners were sweeping, but they were seeing nothing. Stealth technology. Advanced stealth. Thermal masking so perfect that to a standard military sensor, those ships were just empty space. But you can't hide mass. You can't hide gravity. "They're walking into a kill box," Jax whispered. He slammed his hand on the comms button. "Betsy, open a wideband emergency channel to the Sovereign. Override authorization code. Minor priority 1. Channel open. Royal Fleet, this is the Grendel." Jax shouted. "Break formation. You have 3 bogies directly in your path. Distance 4,000 clicks. They are masked." The face of the Admiral appeared this time, Admiral Vance. A man with a jaw like a brick and eyes like flint. He looked annoyed. "Civilian vessel," Vance barked. "I told you to clear the frequency. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. The sector is clear. Cease your jamming or I will vaporize you. Your sensors are looking for heat and radar." Jax yelled back. "I'm looking at mass. There are 3 capital ships sitting right in front of you. Turn hard to starboard, you arrogant son of a..." Admiral Vance cut the feed. 10 seconds later, the universe exploded. It didn't start with a laser beam. It started with torpedoes. Hundreds of them. They materialized out of empty space, decloaking milliseconds before impact. The stealth ships dropped their masking fields as they fired, revealing themselves as jagged, black nightmares. Ships belonging to the Obsidian Syndicate, a rogue faction known for brutality. Boom. Boom. Crunch. The lead royal frigates didn't stand a chance. They evaporated in balls of silent fire. The perfectly polished formation turned into a grinder of shrapnel. "Mayday! Mayday! Shields failing. We can't get a lock. They're jamming targeting scanners. Starboard flank is gone." The HMS Sovereign took a heavy hit. A kinetic slug the size of a bus slammed into its engine block. The majestic Dreadnought listed to the side, venting atmosphere and blue plasma. Jax watched the slaughter from his cockpit. His hands were shaking, hovering over the escape velocity throttle. "We should leave, Jax," Betsy said. Her voice lacked emotion, but the logic was sound. "The Royal Fleet is effectively combat ineffective. The Syndicate ships outgun us by a factor of 1,000. Jax watched the Sovereign. He zoomed in on the bridge. He could imagine the panic. The Princess was on that ship. The Syndicate ships were moving in for the kill. They were fast, agile, and invisible to the military's targeting computers, which were scrambled by electronic warfare suites. The Royal railguns were firing blindly into the dark, missing the black ships entirely. But on Jax's screen, on the Grendel screen, the enemy was glowing bright red. A perfect, high-contrast silhouette of mass against the void. They can't see them, Jax realized. The Navy computers are trying to lock onto heat signatures, but the Syndicate is running cold. They're invisible. Jax, Betsy warned. "The Syndicate flagship is charging a spinal lance. Target: HMS Sovereign. Estimated time to destruction: 30 seconds. Jax looked at his hands. They were dirty. Grease under the nails. Scars from welding accidents. He was a miner. He broke rocks for a living. He looked at the readout of his main tool. The Gungnir-class bore laser. It wasn't a weapon. It was an industrial mining tool. It was designed to drill through the iron core of a planetoid. It didn't fire short bursts. It fired a continuous, terawatt-class beam of coherent light that ignored shields, ignored armor, and simply melted matter until there was no matter left. It had a range of only 50 kilometers. He was 40 kilometers out. "Betsy," Jack said, his voice dropping an octave. "Divert all power from life support." "Jax, divert power from the gravity drive. Divert power from the coffee machine. Route everything, to the Bohr laser capacitor." "Warning," Betsy said, "the Bohr laser is not designed for tracking fast-moving targets. It is a fixed-point drill." Jax grabbed the heavy control yokes of the Grendel. The ship was a flying brick. It didn't turn. It heaved. "Then I'll just have to aim the whole damn ship," Jax snarled. He slammed the throttle forward. The Grendel didn't zoom. It roared. The massive industrial thrusters kicked in, pushing the rusted hulk toward the battle. On the military comms, panic was absolute. "Admiral. Main shields are down. We have a hull breach on decks 4 through 10. I can't see them. I can't return fire. They're charging a main weapon. Brace for impact. Forgive us, Princess." The Syndicate flagship, a jagged spear of black metal, lined up its shot. It drifted effortlessly, arrogant in its invisibility. Then, a proximity alarm screamed on the Syndicate bridge. Not a military signal. A collision warning. The USC Grendel dropped out of the debris cloud like a falling anvil. Jax wasn't stealthy. He was running hot, his engines flaring like small suns. He put his ship directly between the Syndicate assassin and the crippled Sovereign. "Civilian ship." Admiral Vance's voice crackled over the emergency band, filled with disbelief. "Get out of there. You're suicide." "Shut up and watch, Admiral," Jax gritted out. He watched his seismic scope. The red blob of the enemy flagship was dead ahead. "Target lock?" Jax asked. "Unable to lock weapons," Betsy replied. "Target is not recognized as or." "Override safeties," Jax screamed, wrestling with the yoke as the G-forces tried to crush his ribs. "Treat it as a high-density iron deposit." "It's just a rock, Betsy, a big, angry rock." "Safety overridden." Mining protocols engaged. The Syndicate ship fired a warning shot. A plasma bolt scorched the Grendel's hull, melting away a layer of armor plating. Jax didn't blink. The Grendel was built to withstand asteroid impacts. A little plasma was nothing. He lined up the crosshairs. The Syndicate ship was preparing to fire its lance at the Princess. "Say goodnight, you ghost," Jax whispered. He flipped the toggle switch cover, revealing a button that was worn smooth from years of use. He smashed it down. ZZZZZTHOOOOM. It wasn't the pew-pew of a military laser. A beam of pure, concentrated white hell erupted from the nose of the Grendel. It was thick enough to swallow a fighter jet. The beam connected with the Syndicate flagship. Military shields are designed to deflect kinetic rounds and disperse plasma. They work by spreading energy. But the Bohr laser didn't care about dispersion. It was designed to melt the core of a moon. It delivered more thermal energy in 1 second than a nuclear power plant produced in a year, focused on a point 2 meters wide. The Syndicate stealth shields flared and died instantly. The black carbon armor flashed into vapor. The beam didn't stop. It punched through the bow, through the bridge, through the reactor, and out the engines. Jax held the trigger. The lights in his cockpit died. The artificial gravity failed. leaving him floating in his straps. The only light in the universe was the blinding fury of his mining laser. "Hull temperature critical," Betsy warned. "Cooling vents melting." "Hold it," Jax roared. The Syndicate flagship didn't explode. It unzipped. The structural integrity of the enemy vessel failed catastrophically. Molten metal sprayed into the void like blood. The ship split in half, glowing cherry red, before the reactor went critical and consumed the remains in a blinding flash. Jax released the trigger. The Grendel drifted, its nose glowing white-hot. Smoke, actual smoke from frying insulation, filled the cockpit. The two remaining Syndicate ships, seeing their flagship bifurcated by a piece of garbage scow, panicked. They didn't know what weapon had hit them. They assumed it was some secret military superweapon. They cloaked and warped out, fleeing the sector. Silence fell over the battlefield. The debris of the enemy flagship floated past the Grendel's viewport. Jax coughed, waving the smoke away. "Betsy, damage report?" "Main capacitor fused. Primary lens cracked. We are adrift. But the coffee machine is operational." Jax laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "Good girl." The comms channel crackled to life. It was a video link. Admiral Vance was there. He was covered in soot, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. He looked at Jax. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow, stunned look of a man who realized he owed his life to a man he had called trash. "Civilian vessel," Vance stammered. "Identify yourself." Jax leaned back in his floating crash couch. He wiped a smear of grease across his forehead. "This is the USC Grendel," Jax said, his voice raspy. "Just a miner, Admiral. Just clearing some rocks." Before Vance could respond, the signal changed. The Admiral was pushed aside. A young woman stepped into the frame. She was wearing a torn ceremonial dress, her hair disheveled, but her posture was rigid steel. Princess Elara. She looked at the dirty, unshaven man in the rusty cockpit. She looked at the sensors behind him. The ancient, seismic sensors that had seen what the billions of credits of military hardware had missed. She didn't sneer. She didn't look away. She raised her hand in a military salute, sharp, precise, and respectful. "Minor," the princess said, her voice trembling with adrenaline but clear as a bell. "This is Princess Elara of the Royal House. Permission to come aboard your vessel?" Jax looked around his cockpit. Old pizza boxes. Hydraulic fluid stains. The smell of sweat. He grinned. "Permission granted, Your Highness. But watch your step. It's a working ship." The docking maneuver was ugly. Usually, when a royal shuttle docks, it is guided by tractor beams and AI-assisted magnetic locks. It is a seamless, silent kiss between vessels. But the HMS Sovereign was bleeding power and atmosphere. Its guidance systems were fried. And the USC Grendel didn't have tractor beams. It had heavy-duty magnetic clamps designed to latch onto tumbling asteroids. Clang! The sound reverberated through the hull of the mining ship like a gunshot inside a church bell. The Grendel shuddered. "Contact confirmed," Betsy croaked. "Seal is mostly airtight. Oxygen loss is within acceptable limits for a mining operation. Not recommended for asthmatics." Jax unbuckled his crash webbing. He grabbed a rag, wiped the worst of the grease from his hands, it didn't help much, and pulled a heavy projectile pistol from under his seat. He shoved it into the waistband of his dirty cargo pants. "Betsy, keep the reactor hot. If the Sovereign explodes, I want to be able to burn hard." "Understood, Jax. I have started brewing a fresh pot of coffee. Guests are arriving." Jax floated down the zero-G corridor toward the airlock. The gravity plating in the hallway was glitchy, making him weigh 50 kilos 1 second and 5 kilos the next. The airlock cycled. The heavy iron wheel spun, manually, and the door groaned open. The first thing that came through was the smell. Sterile, recycled air mixed with the scent of burnt electronics. Then came the Royal Guard. 4 of them. They wore Aegis IV-powered armor, white ceramic plates, gold filigree, blue visors. They looked like statues of gods. They moved with fluid, servo-assisted grace. They stepped onto the Grendel's deck, which was made of grated steel mesh and stained with 20 years of hydraulic leaks. "Clear," the lead guard shouted, aiming a sleek pulse rifle at Jax's chest. "Secure the perimeter." Jax didn't flinch. He leaned against a bulkheader, crossing his arms. "You're pointing a plasma weapon at a fuel line, genius. You pull that trigger, and we all turn into an expanding cloud of gas." The guard hesitated, lowering his aim slightly. Then, she stepped through. Princess Elara was small. Much smaller than she looked on the view screens. She was wearing a formal diplomatic gown of shimmering blue silk, now torn at the hem and stained with soot. Her face was pale, dusted with ash, but her eyes, violet and piercing, were scanning everything. Behind her limped Admiral Vance. The Admiral looked like he had gone 10 rounds with a threshing machine. His pristine white uniform was ruined. He looked at the rusted pipes and exposed wiring of the Grendel with open horror. "My God," Vance choked out. This is a flying junkyard. The radiation shielding is practically non-existent." "It's called lead," Jax said dryly. "It works. Welcome aboard the Grendel. Wipe your feet." Princess Elara stepped forward. She ignored the grease on the floor. She looked straight at Jax. "You are the captain?" she asked. Her voice was refined, high-core accent, but steady. "I'm the miner," Jax corrected. "Captain, engineer, janitor, and cook." "Name's Jax." "Jax," she repeated, tasting the name. "I am Elara. You saved my life. You have the eternal gratitude of the throne." "Gratitude doesn't buy fuel cells, princess," Jax grunted, pushing off the wall to float closer. "But I'll take a thank you. Now, why are we having a tea party? Your ship is crippled, but the fleet has tugs. Why come over here?" Admiral Vance stepped in front of the princess, his face red. "Because, you insolent mechanic, the Sovereign's core is unstable. We need to evacuate the VIP immediately. And your wretched bucket was the closest vessel with a pressurized hull." "Admiral," Elara cut him off sharply. Vance snapped his mouth shut. Elara looked at Jax. "There is another reason. The Obsidian Syndicate attacked us with stealth technology we have never seen. Our sensors are blind. But you," she gestured to the cockpit. "You saw them." "I saw their mass," Jax said. "Exactly," Elara nodded. "The Royal Fleet is blind. If the Syndicate returns, and they will, we are defenseless. Your ship is the only pair of eyes we have." Jax rubbed his beard. The situation was getting messy. He didn't do messy. He did rocks. "Look, lady," Jax sighed. "I'm a rock hopper. I don't fight wars. I melted that ship because they were in my way. My bore laser is burnt out. The lens is cracked. I'm unarmed." "You are not unarmed," Elara said, stepping closer. The guards tensed, but she waved them down. She reached out and touched a rusted hydraulic pipe running along the wall. "You have this ship. It is sturdy, it's heavy," Jax admitted. "Admiral Vance says we are trash," Elara continued, her eyes flashing. "He says industrial ships are obsolete relics of the pre-war era. But today, the trash destroyed a destroyer that cost more than this entire sector." She looked up at him. "I am commandeering your vessel, Jax, not as a transport, but as my flagship." Jax stared at her. Then he laughed. A loud, barking laugh that echoed in the metallic corridor. "Flagship? This thing? Princess, the toilet backs up if you accelerate too hard." I am serious, Alara said. The Syndicate is hunting us. They can track the energy signatures of our military drives. They can track our quantum comms. But this ship, she looked around. This ship runs on chemical combustion and fission, doesn't it? Dirty fission, Jax nodded. And analog hydraulics. They won't be looking for noise, Alara said. They are looking for silence. Your ship is so loud, so messy, that their algorithms will filter it out as background radiation. You are natural camouflage. Jack stopped laughing. The kid was smart. Stealth by being garbage, Jax mused. I like it. Suddenly, the ship shook violently. The lights flickered. Jax! Betsy's voice screamed from the speakers. Energy spike detected. The Sovereign. Core containment breach in 5 seconds. Brace! Jax roared, grabbing the princess and pulling her down. He hooked his arm around a safety rail. Admiral Vance tried to grab a handle, but his gloved hand slipped on the grease. He went tumbling down the corridor. Boom! It wasn't a sound. It was a shove. The shockwave of the HMS Sovereign exploding hit the Grendel broadside. The heavy mining ship groaned. Metal shrieked. Debris slammed into the hull like hail on a tin roof. Shields! Vance screamed from the floor. Raise the shields. We don't have shields. Jax yelled back over the noise. We have 20 inches of ablative armor. Hold on. The shaking lasted for 10 agonizing seconds. Then, silence. Betsy? Jax called out. Hull integrity at 88%, Betsy reported calmly. External cameras 4 and 5 are destroyed. We have lost the portside grappling claw. However, the coffee is ready. Jax exhaled, helping Alara to her feet. She was shaking, but she nodded a thanks. The Sovereign? Alara asked, her voice quiet. Gone, Jax said bluntly. And the rest of your fleet is scattering. They think you're dead. He walked over to a wall panel and punched a button. A heavy blast shutter opened, revealing a thick, scratched plexiglass window. Outside, expanding clouds of glowing gas and twisted white metal were all that remained of the pride of the Royal Navy. They will think I died with the ship, Alara whispered. Good, Jack said. He walked past her toward the cockpit. If they think you're dead, they stop hunting. For a while, he climbed into the pilot's seat. The leather was cracked and worn. He began flipping toggle switches, real, mechanical switches that clicked satisfyingly. Where are you going? Admiral Vance demanded, limping into the cockpit, followed by the guards. We must rendezvous with the fleet at the rally point. Jack spun his chair around. Admiral, your fleet is compromised. Those stealth ships knew exactly where you were. You have a leak. A spy. If we go to the rally point, we walk into an ambush. Vance bristled. You dare accuse the Royal Navy of treason? I accuse you of being blind, Jack snapped. My sensors saw 3 stealth ships. But my logs show 5 warp signatures leaving the sector. 2 of them were shadowing your fleet before the ambush even started. Vance went pale. So, Jax turned back to the console. We aren't going to the rally point. We're going to the only place a 300,000-ton mining ship can hide. Where? LR asked, standing behind his chair. Jax pointed at the nav screen. It showed a swirling, chaotic mess of purple and brown clouds. An asteroid belt so dense and full of magnetic storms that it was marked with a skull on standard charts. The boneyard, Jack said, atmospheric friction, lightning storms, and millions of rocks tumbling at Mach speeds. No military ship goes in there because your delicate shields can't handle the particle abrasion. He grabbed the heavy throttle lever. But the Grendel? She was born in the dirt. Jax looked at the princess. Better buckle up, Your Highness. It's gonna get bumpy. And Admiral, Jax threw a rag at Vance. Wipe that oil off your face. You're getting my floor dirty. He slammed the throttle forward. The USC Grendel roared. A deep, guttural belch of fire and smoke, and plunged into the darkness of the asteroid field, carrying the future of the galaxy in its rusted belly. The boneyard lived up to its name. It wasn't a silent void. Inside the nebula, the universe screamed. Electrostatic storms lashed against the hull of the USC Grendel with the sound of a million whips cracking. Micrometeoroids, sand grains moving at 10,000 miles per hour, scoured the ship's armor, creating a constant, maddening hiss like rain on a tin roof. Inside the cockpit, the vibration was so intense that Admiral Vance's teeth were audibly chattering. We cannot survive this," Vance yelled, gripping the safety rail until his knuckles turned white. "The turbulence is exceeding structural tolerances. We need to activate the inertial dampeners." "Don't have 'em," Jax shouted back, fighting the heavy iron yoke with both hands. His biceps bulged as he forced the massive ship to bank around a tumbling jagged rock the size of a cathedral. "You don't have inertial dampeners?" Vance looked horrified. "Then what keeps us from being liquefied by the G-forces?" "Crash gel and prayer, Admiral." "Mostly gel." The Grendel drifted sideways, its maneuvering thrusters firing dirty bursts of chemical propellant. A massive bolt of purple lightning struck the ship's nose. Boom crack. The lights in the cockpit died, then flickered back onto emergency red. "Shields!" Vance screamed instinctively. "Report shield status." "For the last time, Admiral, we don't have shields." Jax growled. "Shields are energy. Lightning needs energy. If we had shields up, that bolt would have overloaded the reactor. We have armor. Tungsten. It gets hot, but it doesn't short out." Princess Elara sat strapped in the co-pilot seat. She wasn't screaming. She was watching the sensors. The lithosphere array was cutting through the magnetic interference that would have blinded a military radar. "Jax," she said, her voice tight. "Behind us." 3 contacts. Jax glanced at the seismic scope. There they were. 3 small, dense jagged shapes weaving through the rocks. "They followed us," Jax muttered. "Stubborn bastards. Syndicate Stalker-class corvettes. Fast. Nasty. They are closing distance," Betsy reported. "Their shields are flickering due to the ionic storm, but their plasma cannons are operational. Estimated time to intercept: 2 minutes. We have to fight," one of the Royal Guards shouted, raising his pulse rifle as if he could shoot through the hull. "With what?" Jax snapped. "My laser is fried. I have no missiles. I have no turrets." "Then we are dead," Vance slumped against the wall. "We are trapped in a blender with 3 wolves." Jax looked at the tactical map. He looked at the swirling chaos of the boneyard. He looked at the massive, tumbling asteroids. A grin slowly spread across his grease-stained face. It wasn't a nice grin. It was the grin of a man who knew exactly how to break things. "Betsy," Jax said softly. "Power up the mag clamps." "Port and starboard." "Mag clamps online," Betsy replied. "Are we docking?" "Sort of." "Prepare for barnacle protocol." Jax slammed the throttle into reverse. The Grendel didn't stop smoothly. It shuddered violently as the braking thrusters fired. The pursuing syndicate ships, expecting the prey to run, overshot for a split second. "Vance, shut up and hold on," Jax roared. He spun the ship 90 degrees, aiming the Grendel's belly directly at a massive, iron-rich asteroid passing below them. Contact. Clang thud. The Grendel slammed into the asteroid. The magnetic clamps engaged with a sound like a thunderclap, locking the ship onto the rock's surface. "Engine kill. Go dark," Jax ordered. The Grendel's lights died. The reactor hum dropped to a whisper. To any sensor, the ship was now just a lump of metal attached to a much bigger lump of metal. The 3 syndicate corvettes circled back. They were sleek, black sharks hunting in the dark. Their searchlights swept the dust clouds. They were looking for a ship engine flare. They weren't looking for rock. They are passing us, Alara whispered, watching the passive sensors. Range: 500 meters. Closer, Jax whispered. His hand hovered over a yellow lever marked industrial winch. Limiter override. The lead Syndicate corvette drifted past. It was cautious. Its shields were down to save power in the storm. Now, Jax said, he didn't fire a gun. He fired the starboard grappling hook. It was a harpoon designed to drag megaton rocks. A solid rod of titanium alloy, 3 meters thick, propelled by a magnetic rail cannon. THOOM. The harpoon launched from the Grendel's flank. It crossed the vacuum in a heartbeat. It didn't just hit the Syndicate corvette. It impaled it. The titanium spike punched through the corvette's fragile stealth armor, through the crew quarters, and out the other side. Gotcha, Jax grunted. He yanked the winch lever back. Reeling in. The heavy-duty winch motor screamed. The cable went taut. The Syndicate pilot tried to thrash away, firing engines, but he was tethered to a 300,000-ton mining ship which was anchored to a billion-ton asteroid. Physics was a cruel mistress. The corvette was yanked sideways. Betsy, released mag clamps. Main thrusters, full burn. Jax timed it perfectly. As the corvette was pulled toward them, he detached the Grendel from the asteroid and fired his main engines. He swung the Grendel around like a medieval flail, using the captured corvette as the weight at the end of the chain. "What are you doing?" Vance shrieked, watching the centrifugal force warnings climb. "I'm mining." Jax laughed maniacally. He swung the Grendel toward the second Syndicate ship. The captured corvette, trailing on the cable, became a wrecking ball. The second Syndicate pilot tried to dodge, but he couldn't calculate the trajectory of his own ally being used as a projectile. Crunch! The tethered corvette slammed into the second ship. It was a collision of metal, fuel, and munitions. Both ships disintegrated instantly in a bloom of silent fire and debris. "Two down," Alara shouted, her royal composure cracking into a fierce smile. "That was barbaric." "Effective," Jax corrected. Betsy, cut the line. Explosive bolts fired, severing the cable and dropping the burning wreckage behind them. The third Syndicate ship, the leader, realized that this was not a prey they could hunt. This was a monster. The pilot panic-fired the torpedo. "Incoming," Betsy warned. "Point-blank range. No countermeasures." Jax yelled. He did the only thing he could. He rotated the ship. Presenting the bucket, he spun the Grendel so its rear end, the massive, reinforced cargo bucket used to hold raw ore, faced the torpedo. The bucket was solid steel, 2 meters thick, scarred by thousands of rock impacts. Boom! The torpedo detonated inside the empty cargo bucket. The ship lurched forward, thrown by the explosion. Alarms screamed. "Cargo bucket destroyed," Betsy reported. "Rear armor compromised. But hull integrity holds." Jax checked the scope. The explosion had created a massive cloud of dust and shrapnel. The third Syndicate ship was blinded. "He's running." Jax saw the engine signature of the last enemy turn away. "He's going for reinforcements." "Let him go," Alara said, putting a hand on Jax's shoulder. Her grip was strong. "We cannot fight an armada with a harpoon." Jax slumped back in his chair, wiping sweat from his eyes. The adrenaline was fading, leaving his hands trembling. "Yeah," Jax breathed. "Yeah, okay." He looked at Admiral Vance. The Admiral was on his knees, dry heaving into a waste bin. The Royal Guards were looking at Jax with wide eyes, no longer seeing a dirty mechanic, but a lunatic warlord. "Status?" Jax asked. "Fuel at 4%, Betsy said. "We are running on fumes, Jax," and the coffee pot broke during the maneuver. "Damn," Jax whispered. That was the worst news of the day. Where do we go? LR asked. We can't stay here. The syndicate will return with capital ships. Jax tapped the console, bringing up a star chart. It was an old chart, filled with illegal mining claims and smuggler routes. We need repairs. We need fuel. And we need a place where the Royal Navy and the Syndicate are both afraid to go. He pointed to a coordinate deep in the lawless fringe of the sector. A place marked with a symbol that looked like a broken chain. Freeport 7, Jack said. It's a hive of scum, villainy, and really good mechanics. They don't ask names, they just ask for credits. We have no credits, Vance groaned, wiping his mouth. The royal accounts are frozen if the capital thinks we are dead. LR reached up and unclasped a necklace she was wearing. It was a heavy chain of ether diamonds, glittering with inner light. Each stone was worth a small moon. We have credits, LR said, dropping the necklace into Jax's dirty palm. Get us to Freeport 7, Captain Jax. Jax weighed the diamonds. He looked at the princess. You realize, Jax smirked, that if we go there, you're gonna have to ditch the dress. You look like a target. Then find me some coveralls, LR replied, unzipping the back of her ruined gown without hesitation. I am done being a princess for a while. I need to learn how to swing a wrench. Jax looked at Betsy's camera eye. Betsy, set a course for the fringe. And remind me to teach the princess how to curse. She's gonna need it. The USC Grendel, battered, scorched, and missing its cargo bucket, limped out of the asteroid field, disappearing into the vast indifference of the deep dark. Freeport 7 wasn't a station, it was a tumor growing on the side of a dead moon. It was a chaotic cluster of decommissioned cargo containers, hollowed-out asteroids, and stolen hull plates welded together by desperation. It had no government, no police, and no laws. The only rule was the code of the void. You keep what you can kill. The USC Grendel limped into the docking bay. The ship looked like a corpse. Its rear cargo bucket was gone, blown off in the explosion. The hull was scorched black. One engine was sputtering, coughing out clouds of unburned fuel. This place is repulsively fascinating, Princess Elara murmured, looking out the viewport. She didn't look like a princess anymore. Before they docked, she had taken a pair of industrial shears found in the emergency kit and tacked off her waist-length royal hair. It was now a jagged, chin-length bob. She wore an oversized gray mechanic's jumpsuit that belonged to Jax's former and deceased co-pilot. It was 3 sizes too big, cinched at the waist with a utility belt. It's a cesspool, Admiral Vance sneered, adjusting his torn uniform. We will be murdered within the hour. Not if you keep your mouth shut, Admiral, Jax grunted. Here, you're not a High Lord. You're just cargo. If they find out who you are, they'll sell you to the Syndicate for spare parts. Jax grabbed a heavy duffel bag. Inside were the ether diamonds. Betsy, lock the ship down. Lethal countermeasures on the hatch. If anyone knocks and isn't me, electrocute them. Understood, Jax. Enjoy your shore leave. The market of Freeport 7 was a sensory assault. Neon signs in a dozen alien languages flickered over stalls selling illegal weapons, narcotic fungi, and salvaged cybernetics. Jax walked with a heavy, dangerous stride. The locals, a mix of four-armed scavengers, reptilian mercenaries, and cyborgs, parted way for him. They recognized the walk of a deep-core miner. Miners were crazy. You didn't mess with them. LR walked right behind him, carrying a heavy toolbox. She was trying to mimic his walk. Vance trailed behind, looking terrified. They stopped in front of a massive hangar door painted with a skull and a wrench. Wait here, Jax ordered Vance. Don't talk to anyone. Don't look at anyone. If someone asks, you're my debt slave who suffered brain damage in a depressurization accident. Vance sputtered indignantly, but Jax was already banging on the door. A small sliding panel opened, A mechanical eye whirred out, focusing on Jax. Jax? A synthesized voice buzzed. I thought you were dead. You owe me 500 credits for that thermal coil. I've got something better than credits. Vork, Jax said, open up. The heavy doors groaned open. Inside was a mechanic's paradise. Or hell. Mountains of scrap metal, dissected ships, and weapon parts lay everywhere. In the center hung a half-built destroyer, suspended by chains. Vork slid out from under a chassis. He was a Signian, a creature that looked like a cross between a crab and a tank, with 3 robotic arms grafted onto his biological ones. You look terrible, human, Vork clicked. Your ship is bleeding fuel on my deck. I need a refit, Vork, Jax said, stepping over a pile of gears. I need a new cargo bucket. Reinforced. I need a Class A warp core. And I need guns. Big ones. Vork laughed, a sound like grinding gears. Guns? You're a miner. What are you mining? Battleships? Something like that. Jax tossed the bag to Vork. The cyborg alien caught it. He opened the bag. His mechanical eye zoomed in on the diamonds. The aperture widened in shock. Where did a rock rat steal royal ether stones? Vork hissed, looking around nervously. Found them in a meteorite. Jax lied smoothly. Clean find. Can you do the work? Vork weighed the bag. For this, I can rebuild your ship from the keel up. I have a salvaged rail cannon from a decommissioned heavy cruiser. Illegal in 12 systems. Mount it, Jax said, on the roof. And the girl? Vork pointed a greasy claw at Elara. Is she part of the payment? Jax stepped forward, his hand dropping to the pistol at his hip. The air in the garage grew cold. She's my apprentice, Jax growled. You look at her wrong, Vork, and I'll dismantle you with a screwdriver. Vork held up his hands in surrender. Easy, Jax, just asking. Business is business. For the next 3 days, the Grendel underwent a brutal evolution. Vork's crew swarmed over the ship. They tore out the Burns industrial laser. In its place, they installed the Hellbore rail cannon. It was a weapon of war, bolted onto a chassis meant for peace. It looked ugly, asymmetrical, and terrifying. Inside the ship, Elara was learning. She wasn't just watching. She was working. Her hands, once used to holding wine glasses and signing treaties, were now covered in black grease. Her fingernails were broken. She had a burn mark on her cheek from a soldering iron. No, you're doing it wrong, Jax scolded, sliding out from under the main console. You're trying to bypass the regulator using the standard equation. This is a mining ship, princess. The wiring is non-standard. Elara wiped sweat from her forehead. She was frustrated. The manual says the energy flow must be balanced. The manual was written by engineers in a clean lab on Earth. Jax grabbed the wrench from her. Out here, if you balance the flow, the engine stalls. You have to let it run rich. Make it angry. He twisted a valve. The engine hummed, then roared to life with a deeper, more aggressive thrum. See? Jax smirked. Angry. Elara stared at the engine. She picked up the wrench again. Show me. Again. Jax looked at her. He saw the stubbornness. He saw the intelligence. She wasn't doing this for fun. She was doing it because she realized her royal education was useless here. She was adapting. All right, Jax softened his tone. Hold the wrench like this. More torque, less wrist. By the end of the day, Elara had successfully recalibrated the sublight thrusters. When the green, ready light blinked on, she smiled. It was the first time Jax had seen her smile genuinely. It wasn't a diplomatic smile. It was a smile of accomplishment. Good job, grease monkey, Jax muttered, handing her a bottle of water. Thank you, Master Jax, she teased, taking a swig. Meanwhile, Admiral Vance sat in the corner on a crate, looking miserable. He refused to work. He refused to touch anything dirty. He just watched the news feeds on a cracked datapad Vork had lent him. Suddenly, Vance gasped. "Jax. Princess. Look." He held up the datapad. It was a broadcast from the Syndicate. It was being beamed to every station in the sector. On the screen was a high-resolution image of Elara. Wanted. The traitor princess. Reward. 50 million credits. Crime. Assassinating the king and destroying the royal fleet. What? Elara whispered, dropping her water bottle. The voice on the broadcast was smooth and chilling. It was a Syndicate propaganda officer. Citizens of the galaxy. Do not be deceived. Princess Elara has conspired with alien terrorists to murder her father, the king. The brave Royal Navy attempted to stop her, but she destroyed the flagship Sovereign using a hidden bomb. She is armed and dangerous. She is currently fleeing in a stolen industrial vessel. Lies. Vance shouted, shaking. They killed the king? They are blaming us for their ambush? It's a coup, Jax said, his face darkening. A perfect coup. They wipe out the loyal fleet, kill the king, and frame the heir. Now, if the Syndicate finds you, they look like heroes bringing a traitor to justice. And if the remaining Royal Navy finds me, Elara's voice trembled. They'll shoot you on sight, Jax finished. You have no allies left, kid. Just us. Suddenly, the garage door alarm blared. Jax. Vork shouted from the control booth. We have a problem. Someone scanned the ship's ID signature. Bounty hunters. Jax grabbed his pistol. How many? 3 squads. Heavily armed. They are cutting through the south gate. They know she's here. Jax looked at the Grendel. It was still in pieces. The main cannon was mounted but not wired. The engine cowling was open. Is the engine runnable? Jax barked at Elara. Elara looked at the exposed pipes she had just been working on. I calibrated the thrusters. But the coolant lines aren't sealed. Seal them. Jax threw her a roll of thermal tape. Vance, get inside the ship. Vork, drop the ship. We're leaving. You can't leave. Vork yelled. The clamps are still locked. You'll tear the roof off. Drop it or I blow your shop up. Jax roared. The garage shook as an explosion blew open the south gate. Laser fire erupted. Bounty hunters, mercenaries in mismatched armor, stormed in. There's the target. One shouted. Kill the miner. Capture the girl. Jax took cover behind a stack of crates. He fired back. His heavy pistol boomed, dropping a mercenary. Elara. Fix the damn line. Elara was scrambling on top of the ship's fuselage. Laser bolts zipped past her head, melting the metal near her feet. She was terrified. Her hands were shaking. Soldiers hold the line. She remembered Arthur Vance's story, a legend among her people. Or maybe it was Jax's voice. Make it angry. She screamed in frustration and slapped the thermal tape over the leaking coolant pipe. She grabbed a wrench and tightened the valve until her muscles screamed. It's sealed. She yelled. Get inside. Elara dove into the airlock just as Jax provided covering fire. He retreated, firing blindly, and jumped into the ship. Betsy. Emergency start. The Grendel woke up. The engine that Elara had tuned didn't just hum, it screamed with raw, unrefined power. Vork. Release the clamps. Vork, hiding in his booth, hit the release button. Go, you crazy lunatic. Don't come back. The Grendel dropped from the ceiling chains. It hit the deck with a bone-jarring crash, crushing the squad of mercenaries who were too slow to move. Punch it. Jax yelled, jumping into the pilot seat. He didn't fly out the door. The door was blocked by enemy ships. He aimed the Grendel at the back wall of the station. The wall was thin plus steel. Brace for impact. The Grendel, now armed with a military railgun and fueled by desperation, accelerated. Crash. The ship smashed through the wall of Freeport 7, exploding out into the vacuum of space in a shower of debris and atmosphere. "We are venting oxygen," Betsy warned. "Seal the bulkheads," Jax ordered. "Elara, get on the turret." The new railgun. "I don't know how to use a gun," Elara cried, strapping herself into the gunner's chair. "It's just point and click," Jax yelled. "It's like a video game, but with real physics. Shoot anything that looks like it wants to kill us." Behind them, 3 fast interceptors launched from the station. Elara grabbed the joystick controls. The targeting screen lit up. It was complex, filled with vectors and wind age data. She took a deep breath. She wasn't a soldier. She was a princess. She knew mathematics. She knew geometry. "Calculating, Victor," she whispered. She didn't aim where the ships were. She aimed where they would be. She squeezed the trigger. THOM crack. The Hellbore rail cannon fired. A 20-kilogram tungsten slug accelerated to Mach 7 in a split second. The recoil shook the entire ship. The slug caught the lead interceptor mid-turn. There was no explosion. The enemy ship simply shattered into 1,000 pieces from the kinetic impact. "Target destroyed," Betsy reported cheerfully. "Nice shot, Your Highness." Jax looked back at Elara. She was panting, her eyes wide, her short hair messy. But she wasn't crying. She was grinning. A feral, dangerous grin. "I think I like this ship," Elara said. "Don't get cocky, kid." Jax spun the Grendel toward deep space. "We just kicked the hornet's nest. Now the whole galaxy is coming for us." "Let them come," Elara said, reloading the railgun. "We have work to do." The nebula of lost souls was a cloud of ionized gas thick enough to hide a fleet, or in this case, one very ugly mining ship. The USC Grendel floated in the purple mist. Engines off. Reactor down to 1% output. Inside the mess hall, the mood was grim. Jax was eating a ration bar that tasted like cardboard. Elara was cleaning the grease off her new railgun control interface. Admiral Vance was pacing back and forth, looking like he was about to explode. "We are sitting ducks," Vance hissed. "The Syndicate controls the media, the military channels, and the bounty network. We cannot run forever." "We aren't running," Jax said, chewing loudly. "We're thinking." "There's a difference." "Thinking about what?" Vance snapped. "We have no evidence. Even if we scream the truth, who will believe a disgraced admiral, a dead princess, and a filthy miner?" "The black box," Elara said suddenly. She looked up. Her eyes were tired but sharp. "The Sovereign," she continued, "my father's flagship. It had a royal data core. It records everything on the bridge. Audio, video, sensor logs, and internal comms. The ship was vaporized, Princess," Jax reminded her. "The hull was," Elara corrected. "But the data core is made of neutronium. It is indestructible. It is designed to survive a supernova." Vance stopped pacing. "She's right. The core emits a passive homing signal. But it's back at the ambush site. The Syndicate will be swarming all over that debris field." Jack stopped chewing. He looked at the holographic map of the ambush site. "Swarming with salvage ships," Jax mused. "Picking the bones." He stood up, wiping crumbs off his beard. "Betsy, do we still have those fake transponder codes from that smuggling run in Sector 9? The ones that identify us as a Class -4 waste hauler?" Betsy asked. "Yes." "Why?" "Because," Jax grinned, "nobody looks twice at a garbage truck. We're going back to the graveyard." The ambush site was a silent tomb. Thousands of pieces of twisted white metal floated in the void, the remains of the royal fleet. Syndicate salvage drones buzzed around like flies on a carcass, cutting up valuable armor plates and engines. A large, ugly, boxy ship drifted into the sector. Identification, a Syndicate drone challenged them automatically. "This is Hauler 44, Jax drawled into the comms, putting on a fake accent. "Here to pick up reactor waste. Don't shoot, or I'll spill radioactive sludge all over your nice salvage." There was a pause. "Proceed, Hauler 44. Keep clear of the command sector." "Roger that." Inside the cockpit, the tension was suffocating. "They bought it," Alara whispered, clutching the arms of her chair. "For now," Jax muttered. "Vance, where is the core?" Vance was staring at the sensor screen, his face pale. He was looking at the graves of his men. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to be a soldier. Detecting a faint signal, Vance pointed. "Sector 4 Alpha. Buried under a massive piece of the hull plating. It's deep inside the debris field," Jax noted. "I can't fly the ship in there without hitting something and setting off alarms. We have to go EVA, extravehicular activity." "I'll go." Alara stood up. "You?" Jax raised an eyebrow. "You've never done a spacewalk." "It's my father's ship," Alara said firmly. "I know the override codes for the core. You don't. If you try to hack it, it will self-destruct." Jax looked at her. He saw the steel in her spine. She wasn't asking for permission. "Fine," Jax sighed. "But I'm coming with you." "Vance, you have the con." Vance blinked. "Me? You are leaving me in command of your beast?" "Don't scratch the paint." Jax tossed him the keys. "Literally, a heavy magnetic key fob. And if we aren't back in 20 minutes, or if they start shooting, run. Leave us." Vance looked at the keys, then at Jax. For the first time, the Admiral nodded with genuine respect. "I will keep the engine warm." Space was cold. It was a cliché, but it was true. Jax and Alara floated through the vacuum, tethered together by a carbon fiber line. They wore bulky, industrial pressure suits. Jax's suit was yellow and scratched. Alara's was a spare, too big, patched with duct tape. They navigated through the floating graveyard. A twisted piece of railgun drifted past. A frozen helmet. Alara's breathing was fast and shallow over the comms. "Easy, kid." Jax's voice was calm in her ear. "Don't hyperventilate. Conserve oxygen. Just look at my back." They reached the main wreckage of the Sovereign's bridge. It was a mangled cage of steel. "There," Alara pointed. Buried under a collapsed beam was a small, pulsing black sphere. "The data core." "I need to touch it," Alara said. "Biometric scan." She pushed herself forward, grabbing the jagged metal to pull herself closer. She placed her gloved hand on the sphere. "Beep." DNA confirmed. "Access granted." "Hello, Princess Alara." A holographic projection flickered to life in the vacuum, visible only on their helmet hoods. It wasn't a log. It was a message. Recorded minutes before the explosion. The king appeared. He was bleeding from a head wound, sitting in his command chair as chaos erupted behind him. "Alara, if you are seeing this, I am dead. And the fleet has fallen." Alara choked back a sob. "The Syndicate, they didn't just ambush us. They were let in. The stealth codes, they came from the High Council. It was Grand Duke Kellen. He sold us out. He sold humanity out to the Syndicate in exchange for the throne." The king coughed, the ship shaking around him. "He thinks humans are weak. He thinks we need alien masters to survive. Prove him wrong, my daughter. Go to the Iron Rim. Find the Terran Coalition. They're old allies, they will fight. I love why, static." The recording ended. "Kalen," Alara hissed. "My uncle. My own uncle." "We got it," Jax said, checking his oxygen. "We have the proof." Let's move. We're burning daylight. Suddenly, a floodlight blinded them. A syndicate salvage drone, a spider-like robot with cutting lasers, had drifted around the corner. Its red optic sensor focused on them. Unidentified life forms detected, the drone broadcasted. Scanning, identity confirmed. Priority target, the princess. Run! Jax grabbed Elra's tether and yanked her back. The drone fired its cutting laser. A beam of red light sliced through the metal beam Elra had just been holding. Betsy! Jax screamed into his comms. We are compromised. Pick up. Now. I can't. Vance's voice crackled. A cruiser just decloaked right on top of me. I'm taking evasive action. Jax looked around. They were floating in open space. A killer robot was chasing them. The Grendel was under attack. Okay, Jax gritted his teeth. Plan B. What's Plan B? Elara cried as another laser shot missed her helmet by inches. Jax looked at the floating debris. Specifically, a massive, unexploded anti-ship missile drifting nearby. Physics, Jax said. He grabbed Elara and kicked off hard, landing on the missile casing. Are you insane? Elara screamed. This is a Trident IV missile, Jax said. Hoppin opened the maintenance panel on the missile's side. Solid fuel booster. Dumb guidance. He hotwired the ignition circuit with his multi-tool. Hang on. Whoosh. The missile didn't explode. Its engine ignited. Jax and Elara, clinging to the side of the missile like rodeo riders, were launched across the debris field. The G-force nearly ripped their hands off. The salvage drone couldn't track the sudden bursts of speed. They rocketed toward the Grendel, which was currently weaving through laser fire from a syndicate cruiser. Vance. Opened the cargo bay doors. Jax screamed. You are coming in too hot. Vance yelled back. Open the damn doors. The Grendel's belly hatch yawned open. The missile, with Jax and Elara attached, flew straight into the cargo hold. Jax smashed the cut engine wire. The missile slammed into the rear bulkhead of the cargo bay, crumpling but miraculously not detonating the warhead. They tumbled onto the deck, gasping for air. Close the door. Jump! Jax roared into the comms. On the bridge, Admiral Vance, sweating profusely, slammed the FTL throttle. Engaging warp. The Grendel vanished in a streak of light, milliseconds before a plasma volley obliterated the space where it had been. Safe in hyperspace. Jax pulled his helmet off. He threw up. Space travel on the outside of a missile was not recommended for digestion. Elara sat up. She was holding the data core against her chest like a baby. She was shaking, but her eyes were dry. They were burning with a cold, terrifying light. We have the name, Elara said softly. Grand Duke Kellen. And we have a destination. Jax wiped his mouth. The Iron Rim. The Terran Coalition. The Terrans? Vance walked into the cargo bay. He looked impressed, terrified, and exhausted. Jax, the Terrans are isolationists. They are a breakaway human faction that rejected the monarchy 100 years ago. They hate royals. They are militarized zealots who live on fortress worlds. Sounds like my kind of people. Jax stood up, cracking his back. They might shoot us before we land, Vance warned. They might. Elara stood up. She looked at the rail cannon mounted above them. She looked at the grease on her suit. But they hate aliens more than they hate royals, Elara said. My father said they would fight. And I am going to bring them a war. She looked at Jax. Teach me how to shoot that pistol, Jax. Jax smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. First lesson, princess. Don't miss. The Iron Rim was not a place you visited. It was a place you survived. It was a star system on the very edge of the galaxy, surrounded by a dense nebula of radioactive dust. Here, the planets were high-gravity hellscapes, and the people who lived on them had evolved, culturally and physically, to be harder than the rock they walked on. The USC Grendel dropped out of warp. "Warning," Betsy chirped instantly. "We are being targeted by everything." Jax looked at the view screen. There were no sleek silver ships here. The Terran Coalition fleet looked like flying skyscrapers. Massive, blocky, painted in matte gray radar-absorbent coating. They bristled with kinetic cannons. Guns so big they had to be built around the ship's spine. "Unidentified vessel," a voice crackled over the comms. It sounded like gravel in a blender. "You have entered Terran sovereign space. Power down your reactor and prepare to be boarded, or we will turn you into scrap." "Friendly bunch," Jax muttered. He cut the engines. "Do as they say, Betsy, don't twitch." "They are locking weapons," Admiral Vance whispered, sweating. "Those are mass drivers. One shot will go through our shields, if we had them." "Relax, Admiral," Alara said. She was standing at the airlock, wearing her grease-stained coveralls, checking the magazine of her pistol. "They respect strength. Don't look afraid." Clang. The docking tube connected. The airlock hissed open. Terran Marines stormed in. They were giants. They wore exosuits, powered exoskeletons that hissed with hydraulic pressure. Their helmets were painted with skull motifs. They didn't carry laser rifles. They carried heavy rotary cannons that fired depleted uranium slugs. "Hands on your heads," the lead Marine barked. Vance raised his hands immediately. Jax leaned back against a crate, crossing his arms casually. Alara stood her ground, hand resting near her hip. "I demand to speak to General Kincaid," Alara said, her voice cutting through the noise. The Marine stomped forward. He towered over her, his helmet sensors scanning her face. "You demand?" The Marine laughed, a harsh, metallic sound. "You look like a mechanic's assistant, little girl. Why would the warlord of the Iron Rim speak to you?" "Because," Alara pulled the royal data core from her belt and held it up. "I brought him a war." The war room of Citadel Prime General Kincaid sat at a table made of solid obsidian. He was an old man, but he looked like he was carved from granite. He had a cybernetic eye and scars running down the left side of his face, souvenirs from the Xenon Wars. He looked at the hologram projecting from the data core. He watched the king's death. He listened to the confession of treason by Grand Duke Kalen. Kincaid leaned back, lighting a thick cigar. The smoke drifted up into the ventilation fans. "So," Kincaid grunted, "the royals finally eat themselves. Your uncle sold out humanity to the Syndicate. And now the aliens are pulling the strings of the throne." "Yes," Alara said. She stood on the other side of the table. She looked tiny in the massive room, but she didn't flinch under Kincaid's one good eye. "And you want the Coalition to help you?" Kincaid scoffed. "Why? We left the Empire 100 years ago because your grandfather called us barbarians. You taxed our worlds, stole our resources, and treated us like dogs. Why should I spill Terran blood to put the princess back on a cushioned throne?" Admiral Vance stepped forward, trying to look diplomatic. "General, this is about the stability of the entire human sector. If the Syndicate takes over..." "Shut up, Blue Blood," Kincaid snapped. "I'm talking to the mechanic." He looked at Alara. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't just execute you, keep the black box, and blockade our border until the Syndicate rots." Alara slammed her hand on the table. "Because they aren't just coming for the throne, Kincaid, they're coming for humanity." She pointed at the map. "The Syndicate thinks we are weak. They think we are divided. They think they can use stealth ships and political puppets to enslave us. If I fall, the core worlds fall. And once they have the core resources, they will come for the Iron Rim. You know the math. You can't fight the whole galaxy alone." Alara leaned in close, her eyes burning. "I don't want a cushioned throne. I want to kill the bastards who murdered my father, I want to remind the galaxy why they used to be afraid of the dark. You call yourselves the Iron Fist of humanity? Well, prove it. The room went silent. The Terran officers looked at their general. Kincaid stared at Elara. He looked at her dirty fingernails. He looked at the calluses on her hands, hands that had rebuilt an engine. He looked at the pistol on her hip. He smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "You've got a mouth on you, kid," Kincaid chuckled. "I like that." He stood up. "The coalition has been waiting for a fight for 50 years. Our guns are getting cold." He pressed a button on the console. A red alert siren began to wail throughout the fortress. "General alert." Kincaid's voice boomed over the speakers. "Mobilize the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fleets. Load AP rounds. Spin up the FTL drives." He turned to Elara. "We aren't fighting for your crown, princess. We're fighting because nobody kills humans but other humans." The hangar bay Jax was checking the ammo feed on the Grendel's railgun when Elara returned. She was flanked by Kincaid and a squad of Terran shock troopers. "We have a deal?" Jax asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "We have an army," Elara corrected. Outside the massive hangar doors, the sky darkened. It wasn't night. It was ships. Thousands of them. The Terran fleet was launching. Dreadnoughts, massive bricks of guns and armor, rose from the planet's surface, fighting gravity with brute force engines. Gunships swarmed like angry hornets. "My God," Vance whispered, looking at the armada. "There are more capital ships here than in the entire Royal Navy." "The Royals spend money on gold trim and parades," Kincaid spat, walking up to them. "We spend money on ammo." Kincaid looked at the rusty, ugly USC Grendel. "So, this is your flagship?" Kincaid asked, raising an eyebrow. "A mining scow? She's got character," Jax defended, patting the hull. "And a really big gun." "Good," Kincaid nodded. "Because you're leading the charge." "Say what?" Jax blinked. "The Syndicate knows our signatures," Kincaid explained. "If a Terran fleet warps in, they'll scatter. But if a lone, damaged mining ship warps in, appearing to surrender..." Elara understood immediately. "We are the bait." "Exactly," Kincaid grinned. "You warp in. Broadcast the surrender codes. Get close to the usurper's fleet. Distract them. And then you drop the hammer," Jax finished. Elara looked at Jax. "Can the Grendel take that kind of punishment? Being the target of an entire fleet?" Jax looked at his ship. He looked at the new plating Vork had welded on. He looked at Betsy's camera eye. "She's a rock breaker, princess," Jax said. "She doesn't break easily. We'll hold the line. Load up." Kincaid ordered his men. "We jump in 1 hour. Destination: the royal capital." 1 hour later, hyperspace. The Grendel was vibrating. The strain of the FTL drive was pushing the old hull to its limit. Inside the cockpit, it was just the three of them again. Jax, Elara, Vance. Elara was cleaning her pistol, methodically stripping it and oiling it. Her hands were steady. "You okay, kid?" Jax asked softly. "I'm going home to kill my uncle," Elara said, sliding the barrel back into place. Click. "I'm fine." "You've changed," Jax observed. "When I fished you out of that wreck, you were shaking." "I was a princess then." Elara looked up. Her eyes were hard, like diamonds formed under pressure. "Now I'm a Terran." "Not quite," Jax smirked. "You're still too pretty to be a Terran. But you'll do." "Approaching destination," Betsy announced. "The Royal Capital System. Detecting massive fleet presence. The Syndicate has merged with the Trader fleet. Approximately 500 ships. 500 against 1, Vance swallowed hard. "I hope the Terrans are punctual." "Time to act." Elara stood up. She keyed the comms. Betsy, open a channel to the entire system. Broadband. Channel open. Elara took a deep breath. She didn't sound like a mechanic anymore. She didn't sound like a princess either. She sounded like a queen. "This is Elara of House Valis," she spoke into the microphone. "I am transmitting from the USC Grendel. I am surrendering myself. Do not fire. I am coming home." She looked at Jax. He nodded. He pushed the throttle forward. The Grendel burst out of hyperspace, right in the middle of the enemy fleet. The enemy fleet was a wall of guns. 500 warships. A mix of stolen royal cruisers and jagged syndicate stealth ships. Surrounded a lone, rusty USC Grendel. On the bridge of the Grendel, a holographic projection flickered to life. It was Grand Duke Kellen. He sat on the throne of his flagship, the Apex, a supercarrier twice the size of the destroyed Sovereign. He wore the royal crown, but it looked wrong on him. Too big. Too unearned. "Elara," Kellen smiled smoothly. "My dear niece. You look terrible. Is that grease on your face? How far the House of Valis has fallen." "Uncle," Elara stood in the center of the cockpit. She didn't wipe the grease off. She wore it like war paint. "I see you found the crown. Did you wash my father's blood off it first?" Kalen's smile faltered for a second. "Necessary sacrifices for the stability of the realm. Surrender the data core, and I will grant you a merciful exile. Refuse, and I will vaporize that garbage scow you are standing in." "I don't have the data core," Elara lied, her voice calm. "I gave it to a friend." "A friend?" Kalen laughed. "You have no friends left. The galaxy has abandoned you." Elara looked at the camera. She smiled. The feral, dangerous smile she had learned from Jax. "You're wrong, Uncle. I made new friends. And they are very old-fashioned." She looked at Jax. "Now." Jax punched a big red button on the console. "Beacon active." Behind the Grendel, space didn't just warp. It shattered. Crack boom. The arrival of the Terran coalition wasn't subtle. They didn't use graceful warp bubbles. They used teardrives that ripped a hole in reality. The Terran First Fleet poured out of the rift like a landslide. Hundreds of flying bricks, massive, blocky dreadnoughts, appeared instantly, sandwiched around the Grendel. "What is this?" Kalen screamed on the screen. "Terrans?" "General Kincaid," Elara said into the comms. "The target is the Apex. Kill everything else." "With pleasure," Kincaid's voice growled. The battle didn't start with lasers. It started with physics. The Terran ships fired their main batteries. Mass drivers. They launched 50-ton tungsten slugs at a fraction of the speed of light. Syndicate shields were designed to disperse energy beams, lasers, plasma. They were terrible at stopping solid matter. Smash. The front line of Kalen's fleet simply evaporated. Ships crumpled like soda cans under the kinetic impact. There were no explosions at first, just metal shattering metal. Then came the reactor breaches. "Break formation." Kalen shrieked. "All ships, fire at will." The void turned into a light show of death. Green syndicate plasma clashed with Terran ballistic tracers. "Jax. We are in the crossfire," Admiral Vance yelled, watching the shields, or rather, the armor integrity drop. "I know." Jax wrestled the yoke. "Betsy, divert power to forward thrusters. We're charging." "Charging?" Vance looked insane. "We are a mining ship. We're the only one small enough to get close." Jax roared. "The Terrans are handling the fleet. We want the king." The Grendel dove into the chaos. It was a suicidal run. Syndicate fighters strafed them, scorching the hull. But the Grendel was built to survive asteroid impacts. Small laser fire just annoyed it. Elara was on the rail cannon turret. She wasn't using targeting computers anymore. She was firing on instinct. THOOM crack. She blasted a fighter out of the sky. Then another. Clear a path. Alara screamed. Ahead of them, the massive supercarrier Apex was trying to turn away. Kalen was running. He's charging his warp drive. Betsy reported, he's going to jump. If he jumps, we lose him forever. Alara cried. The Terran ships are too slow to catch him. Jax looked at the distance. 5 kilometers. Too far for the rail cannon to penetrate the Apex's heavy rear shields. He's not jumping, Jax growled. Not while I have my fishing gear. Jax slammed the throttle to emergency overdrive. The Grendel's engines flared white hot, melting their own cowlings. The ship rocketed forward. Prepare the harpoon. Jax yelled. Target is a supercarrier. Betsy warned. Mass ratio is 500 to 1. If we tether to him, he will drag us into warp. We will be torn apart. I'm not trying to pull him back, Jax gritted his teeth. I'm becoming an anchor. The Grendel closed the distance. 3 kilometers. 1 kilometer. The Apex's massive engines were glowing blue, preparing for the jump. The space around it was beginning to distort. Fire. Thunk. The titanium harpoon launched. It trailed a cable as thick as a tree trunk. It smashed through the Apex's rear shield, weakened by the warp charge, and buried itself deep into the engine exhaust port. HIT. Alara cheered. Brake. Brake. Jax slammed the reverse thrusters. The cable went taut. Groan. The sound of the metal straining was deafening. The Grendel shuddered as if it had hit a wall. On the Apex, the warp calculation failed. The computer couldn't compensate for the sudden, massive drag of 300,000 tons of dead weight attached to its tail. Warp field collapsed. Betsy reported, they are stuck. We stopped them. Vance cheered. Yeah, but now they're pissed. Jax yelled. The Apex, realizing it couldn't run, turned its turrets inward. Massive anti-capital guns aimed at the tiny Grendel dangling on the wire. Reel us in. Jax ordered. Get under their guns. Hug the hull. The winch screamed. The Grendel was pulled toward the massive carrier like a spider climbing its web. Giant plasma bolts flew past them, missing by inches because the Grendel was moving too fast and too close. Clang. The Grendel slammed onto the surface of the Apex's hull. Mag clamps. Lock us down. The mining ship clamped onto the skin of the enemy flagship. They were now sitting on top of the target, like a tick on a dog. The Apex's big guns couldn't aim at them. They were too close. We are secure, Betsy said, but they are deploying security droids to the hull. Jax unbuckled. He grabbed a heavy, diamond-tipped industrial cutter, a portable version of a mining drill. Alara, Jax said, you want your throne back? Alara unbuckled. She grabbed her pistol and a heavy wrench. Let's go knock on the door, she said. Vance. Jax pointed at the cockpit. Keep the lamps locked. If we fall off, we die. Vance nodded, sitting in the pilot's chair. I will hold. Go get him. The hull of the Apex. Jax and Alara walked across the surface of the enemy ship in mag boots. Above them, the space battle raged, a kaleidoscope of fire and destruction. Droid troopers poured out of an airlock. Cover me, Jax yelled, revving the diamond cutter. Alara dropped to one knee. She fired. Bang. Bang. Her aim was true. 2 droids sparked and collapsed. Clear. Jax ran to the main airlock of the Apex's bridge tower. He slammed the cutter against the door. Sparks showered him as the diamond blade chewed through military-grade alloy. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. The door gave way. Atmosphere vented out, knocking the remaining droids off their feet. Jax and Alara jumped into the hole. The bridge of the Apex. Grand Duke Kalen was screaming at his officers. Get that parasite ship off my hull. Reboot the warp drive. Suddenly, the blast doors to the bridge melted. A circle of glowing orange metal fell inward. Jack stepped through the smoke, holding the smoking industrial cutter like a minigun. Elara stepped out behind him, pistol raised. The bridge crew froze. Kalen stared. He saw the dirty miner. He saw his niece, hair chopped short, covered in grime, looking like a demon. Guards! Kalen shrieked, fumbling for his own gold-plated pistol. Jax didn't hesitate. He threw the heavy cutter. It wasn't a graceful throw. It was a brick. It smashed into Kalen's chest, knocking the wind out of him and sending him sprawling across the floor. The guards raised their rifles, but Elara was faster. She didn't shoot to kill. She shot the control panel for the artificial gravity. ZAP. Gravity failed. Everyone floated. The guards flailed, confused. But Jax and Elara were used to zero-G. They kicked off the walls, moving like sharks. Jax tackled the head guard, slamming him into the ceiling. Elara pushed off a console and flew straight at Kalen. The Grand Duke was floating, trying to aim his gun. Elara grabbed his wrist, twisted it with the mechanic's grip she had developed, and kicked him in the chest. He slammed into the main view screen. Elara pinned him there, her pistol pressed against his forehead. "Call it off," Elara hissed. You wouldn't dare," Kalen wheezed. "I am the king." Elara looked out the window. The Terran fleet was dismantling the Syndicate ships. The battle was won. "You're not a king," Elara said coldly. "You're just a bad investment." She pistol-whipped him. Hard. He went limp. Elara grabbed the comms mic floating nearby. "This is Princess Elara," her voice broadcasted to the entire fleet. "Grand Duke Kalen is captured. The apex has fallen. Surrender, or be erased." Outside, the Syndicate ships, seeing their leader taken and facing the Terran juggernaut, powered down their weapons. Silence fell over the battlefield. Jax floated over to Elara. He looked at the unconscious Duke, then at the view of the stars. "Not bad for a mechanic," Jax grinned. Elara looked at her reflection in the glass. She didn't see a princess anymore. She saw a survivor. "I had a good teacher," she replied. Epilogue. The coronation. The royal Great Hall was restored, but it felt different. The nobles were there, dressed in their finery. But lining the walls were not just royal guards. There were Terran Marines in scarred power armor. And in the corner, leaning against a pillar, was the dirty, unshaven asteroid miner drinking champagne out of a bottle. Queen Elara sat on the throne. She wore the royal robes, but underneath, everyone knew she was wearing the mechanic's jumpsuit. She had refused to let her hair grow back. The short bob was already becoming the new fashion trend among the nobility. General Kincaid stood by the throne. The Terran coalition had signed a new treaty, partners, not subjects. Elara stood up. She looked at the crowd. Then she looked at Jax. She waved him over. The crowd gasped as the miner walked up the steps of the throne. "The ship is fixed," Jax said quietly. "Vork put a new cargo bucket on her. She's ready to fly." "You're leaving?" Elara asked, her voice dropping the royal tone. "I'm a miner, Elara. I belong in the dark. I don't do," he gestured at the gold and silk. "This." Elara nodded. She understood. She reached into her robe and pulled out a small box. "Payment," she said, "for the ride." Jax opened it. It was a medal. The Star of Valor. But next to it was a contract. Exclusive mining rights. The royal sector. Tax-free. Forever. Jax laughed. "Now that is a payout." He turned to leave. "Jax," Elara called out. He stopped. "If I ever need a ride," Jax tapped his chest. Channel 16. The open frequency. "Just scream really loud." He walked out of the hall, the heavy doors closing behind him. Back on the USC Grendel, Admiral Vance. who had decided to retire and open a logistics company, waved goodbye from the docking bay. Jax climbed into the pilot's seat. The leather was still cracked. The smell of oil was still there. "Welcome home, Jax," Betsy croaked. "Coffee is brewing." Jax smiled, watching the stars. "Betsy," Jax said, engaging the thrusters. "Let's go find some rocks." The Grendel fired its engines. A dirty, beautiful plume of fire, and vanished into the deep, dark black.